We have a lot to talk about, so let's get to it. I like this metaphor of Frankenstein's children because I think the 1818 novel by a young girl, really, named Mary Shelley, has provided the root metaphor for our relationship to technology. And in case you don't know the novel, and you know the films or whatever, it's a poignant, powerful, I would say profound meditation on what happens when creatures become creators, right? So Dr. Frankenstein creates this being, this new human being, who is more literate than most Americans. He is. I mean, if you read the novel, he quotes Goethe, and he reads Paradise Lost. See, that's the monster you don't usually see. He's more like us than Victor Frankenstein is, actually. And so it really gets at, for me, this metaphor of the creature becoming creator. It really gets at this tenuous, complicit, conflicted, and intimate relationship, because he is his son. The monster is his son, and he recoils from his son. He recoils from his creation. And the monster doesn't know what to do with that. So he goes and reads Paradise Lost, and he says, I guess I'm more like Satan. Anyway, nice metaphor to begin with. Bill Joy, chief scientist for Sun Microsystems, agrees that coming advances in computing power seem to make it possible that an intelligent being will be built by the year 2030. And that shortly thereafter we will gradually replace ourselves with robotic technology. And that and achieving near immortality by downloading our consciousness. But Joy asks, if we are downloaded into our technology, what are the chances that we will thereafter be ourselves, or even human? Now we're in the philosophical realm. Given the seriousness of the threat, interesting, it's a threat, Joy wonders why the development of new technologies proceeds without hesitation. It's a good question, isn't it? Because we might hesitate, but if there's a technological development that's available, we will do it. We might, say, hey, maybe should we really do this? Doesn't matter, we're doing it. Because we never say no to these new developments. What are the consequences of that? Carl Jung said it's because our technology outpaces our morality. Our creatures are more powerful than us, just like Frankenstein. And we don't know what to do with them. And so we try to kill them. Or we assimilate into them completely. So what we do here at the Philosophical Research Society is we try to go behind or beneath appearances, underneath appearances, and we try to get at the deeper issues. We ask questions, and we get some answers maybe, but mostly that produces more questions. So for the next 6 weeks, I'm really looking forward to talking with you about this thing called technology, and what it does to us, and how it changes us. And I think you're in for some surprises. I've already been surprised just by my research. So let's get into it. Technology comes from the Greek word techne, which is related to the word for weaving or to fabricate, to make. All right? So for the Greeks, and for most Westerners throughout history, technology has been inseparable from craft or even art. It is a making, a weaving, a connection of one thing to another. You know what else that has that sense, and that is poesy or poetry. The Greek word poet means maker. The Greek word poetry means simply to make. All right, so again, it's related to technology. So technologists are poets. They're makers. Composition, poetry, literally a making, a fabrication, which is also the word for lot, which we can talk about. To make or compose. Technology is magic. We could spend the whole series talking about the role of magic in human development. And, in the early 20th century, religious studies scholars really dismissed magic because people like Sir James George Frazer saw magic as really a primitive time of human development. It was the belief that you could manipulate nature through your own devices. Well, isn't that technology? Of course it is. But Frazer and some of the other anthropologists and thinkers who were bound to this positivistic outcome, like we have come beyond that, right? So that's magic. Those people, they do magic. What do? Well, we do science. There's no difference. You're manipulating nature. You're trying to understand it in the process. You're trying to achieve a certain outcome, and to achieve that outcome, you must understand the processes at work as best you can. If you don't have an electron microscope, your perspectives are going to be limited. But that doesn't mean it's not the same kind of work. It's exactly the same kind of work. I went to the doctor recently, and they took blood out of my arm, and they said all this stuff was in my blood, like platelets and stuff. What do I know? I don't know anything about this. This doctor is a shaman. She's a witch. I mean, I don't know what she's talking about, but I do what she says because she has this specialized knowledge. She sees things that I can't see, like LDL and HDL and glucose, all that stuff. I don't know what it even means. She tells me what to do. This is magic. This is also technology. When I was doing my doctoral work, I was tech support for the law library. So I went around fixing people, professors and students' computers in the law school. And I realized early on I was a priest. Because all they had was this box. And I had special knowledge about this box. And not only that, but I could save them because they were in trouble. Their box wasn't working. And only I knew how to fix it. So I could have told them anything, honestly. I could have told them anything. Just use some computerese, and say, well, it's because your RAM BIOS is what, Oh, okay. It puts you, technology, it puts you in a magical place, especially if you master the technology. If you can master the technology, it makes you a magician. Because you can do things other people can't do. And so technology, here's the dictionary definition, as it's come to be. The application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes, especially in industry, advances in computer technology, recycling technology, etc. So I wanted to start here because right off the bat, when we think of technology, we should think of techne if we want to get behind the issue, beneath the superficial issues. We need to think techne. And actually, people have been thinking techne for a long time. And we have actually great stories and fascinating concepts about techne, about this practice of manipulating the world to our own ends. Now, our most powerful technology is right. I'm using it right now. There's a great story in the Phaedrus about King Thamus and Tut from Egypt. It goes like this. The Egyptian god, says to Thamus, the king, these things I have for you, these technologies, these techniques, I have things that will make you wiser and make life easier for you. And I will give you better memories. And Thamus, the king, the god king, says, oh, ingenious toad, the parent or inventor of an art is not always the best judge of the utility or inutility of his own inventions to the users of them. Okay? Are you listening, Mark Zuckerberg? The parent or inventor of an art is not always the best judge of the utility or inutility of his inventions. And in this instance of writing, you are the father who are the father of letters from a paternal love of your own children have been led to attribute to them a quality which they cannot have. For this discovery of yours, writing, will create forgetfulness in the learner's souls because they will not use their memories. They will trust to the external written characters and not remember of themselves. The specific which you've discovered is not an aid to memory, but to reminiscence. Not to memory, but to reminiscence. And you give your disciples not truth, but the semblance of truth. They will be hearers of many things and will have learned nothing. They will appear to be omniscient and will generally know nothing. They will be tiresome company, having the show of wisdom without the reality. So that's 2,500 years ago. Right? Talking about our most useful technology, which is writing. And this is the genius and the danger of technology, is we use it without knowing how it uses us. So writing, for example, and Thamas mentions this, is objective. I had a whole doctoral seminar on writing and its effects on the human psyche, which I will not inflict upon you tonight. But it is incredibly powerful. It's like the most important seminar I've ever had, I think. Because what happens when speech becomes objective is huge. It's enormous. The psychic and other changes that come from that. When communication becomes an object, it's a thing. It's outside of you. In oral cultures, before writing, all communication was within you. And to communicate, you had to have someone next to you, right? And so it was a deeply human, intimate thing, communication. And a lot of the world's mythologies talk about words as made of breath, you know? Well, breath is your life, you know? The coming and going of breath is your life. And at the same time, there's this sense of the beauty of the impermanence of words. The beauty of the impermanence of words, right? Because you say something, and it's there and it's gone. It makes it more precious. That makes profound sayings something you want to treasure and keep. Or it makes, basic stuff something you want to treasure and keep. Do you know there's a spring on the north side of the mesa past the river there? There's a spring, a fresh spring. That's important information in an oral culture. And you provide that information through words that appear and disappear. They're made of breath. Right? What happens in that kind of culture is that memory is everything. If you forget something, it's gone. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean it's gone. And people in oral cultures, from the ancient Hebrews to indigenous people to all over, they know this. And so what is the medium that you need to keep information? Not just information about where the spring is by the mesa, but information about how to live. It has to be encapsulated in stories. And the better the story, the better the memory, right? And so in oral cultures, storytelling is, from literate cultures, we look back and we think, oh, that's nice. It's not nice, it's life. Without those stories, you die. You literally die, and whole cultures did. Because the stories were gone. And what killed many of those cultures or decimated them? Writing. Why? Because writing puts that intimate, personal, deeply human technology into an object outside of you. And this leads to all kinds of things. Again, I said I wasn't going to inflict the seminar on you, but when something becomes outside of you, it's not inside of you. What does that mean? It means, first of all, that it's available to other people. There it is. There's your letter. You know, okay. We all can read it. Anybody, in fact, we can pick it up and take it across the ocean, and someone else can read it. It's a fascinating, brilliant, powerful technology. But it comes with a cost, like all technology. It comes with a cost. And the cost was, among other things, the loss, or not the loss, but the transformation of subjectivity, which was, frankly, communal. The subjectivity was not individualistic, like we're used to. It was communal. You know why? Very simply. Like we saw in the definitions, practicality. I have to be here for you to hear me. You have to be near me. With writing, however, we don't have to ever see each other. I've taught hundreds, maybe thousands of students and never met them. And that has its own advantages, and it certainly has its disadvantages. We lose community, and so what online learning, for example, is always trying to do is recreate that community. And I don't want to say it's not possible, but it's certainly different. Writing is objective, and Plato and Thamus were right. It destroys memory. It's great, right? It's great to make lists and to have lists and say, okay, there's my thing. It's outside of you. You don't have to hold it in your mind because you're holding it in your hand. Okay. That means I don't have to memorize it. Again, when the ancient Hebrews got the Torah, they were told to pass this down. Paradoson is the Greek word. They were told to pass it down. And they did with remarkable fidelity to their descendants. Because it's so precious. It can go away at any moment. And yet, writing is a better technology in terms of passing stuff down because it's now an object and you can keep it, you can make copies of it, and that's great. But what do you lose in that process? One of the other things you lose is dialogue, right? So again, in an oral culture, without this technology of writing, everything is dialogue. It's no wonder that Plato wrote dialogues, and he saw dialogue as the way to truth. He called it dialectic, but it's basically dialogue. And the irony, of course, is that Plato was the one who was against writing. He didn't want poets in his republic for all kinds of reasons, but one of them was that, well, they were singing their poems, they weren't really writing it. But related to that is, he thought that writing and poetry and art were too involved with the appearances, the mode of becoming in the world, not the mode of being that is unchanging. And so he didn't want people to lose their memory, like he told in this story in the Phaedrus, the story from Egypt. How did he do that? He wrote it. Don't use writing, he wrote. And there it is the implicit paradox of technology. Don't use writing, he wrote. Because writing restructures consciousness. And I know that may sound like an exaggerated claim, but I think we can back it up. If you read Walter Ong's Orality and Literacy, he does a pretty good job of this. Other people have written about it. Writing restructures consciousness because I am now out of that communal context and I'm in a more solitary context. For example, right now most of you are looking at me and listening to me, thank you. But if I said, will you look up Plato's Phaedrus? You immediately go to your phones and you immediately become individuals. You are lost. You're looking down and you're looking onto the page. This is writing. It's solitary by nature. It's objective by nature. It's outside of you. I'll tell you one other thing and then I'll stop inflicting this seminar on you. Writing produces thought. You do not think rationally without writing. So, writing restructures consciousness? Yes. Anything that, almost any way that you can think of getting at truth, with a capital T and in quotation marks apparently, you do that because of writing. Let me tell you a story to illustrate that. It's a true story. There was an anthropologist in the early 20th century who was interested in this, and Milman Perry is that his name? Anyway, he went to study these oral cultures in Siberia, which still existed there then. And he was interested in how oral peoples think, okay? And so he would give them what we would recognize as fairly simple thought exercises that we would immediately answer, that any grade school child would answer. And they were flummoxed by it, these oral cultures. He said, "Can you define a tree?" And they're like, "Dude, you don't know what a tree is?" See, he's asking for an abstraction. They don't have that, because writing is an abstraction. They are experiential. How can you not know what a tree is? Why are you asking me what a tree is? And my favorite one is they give them a syllogism. Syllogism is a three-part argument with the conclusion suppressed. You'll recognize it. So he says to them, in Nova Zembla, all the bears are white. There is a bear in Nova Zembla. What color is the bear? And the people say, I've never been to Nova Zembla. I don't know. No abstraction. Everything's grounded in experience. Everything. Right? So for the Plains tribes, this right now is the month of the popping trees. Because I don't know if you've ever been in the Plains in January, but it's freaking cold. And it gets so cold that the trees pop. You hear that? It's visceral. It's, dare I say, real? As opposed to January? What the hell's January? Some Roman god about something? I don't know. It's an abstraction versus experience. Here's what Ong says. I should have just read this. Writing and print and the computer are all ways of technologizing the word. Once the word is technologized, there's no effective way to criticize what technology has done with it without the aid of the highest technology available. Plato's problem, right? There is no effective way to criticize what technology has done with it without the aid of the highest technology available. Moreover, the new technology is not merely used to convey the critique. In fact, it brought the critique into existence. Plato's philosophically analytic thought, as has been seen, including his critique of writing, was possible only because of the effects of writing that was beginning to have on mental processes. All right. A wonderful, important example of a couple of things. One, technology is not just a tool. It's not, the bone in the opening of 2001: A Space Odyssey. That's definitely technology, but it's also natural, by the way. It is everything we do in the world is techne. It's a practice, right? And nothing is more important to us for doing things in the world than writing. Now, Ong was writing in 1982, before the internet, but he did see television, and Marshall McLuhan is a name you may know, who kind of jumped on this bandwagon too, and they saw in television what they called secondary orality, a kind of return to the oral but with the visual, but not a real return. Don't mistake him here. You're not going back to an oral culture, but you are incorporating new elements of orality. They did not get to see the internet. I don't know if that's good or bad. They lived happy lives without the internet, I suppose. All right, so in the remainder of our time, I want us to just go through some ways human beings have thought about technology. And that comes through stories and concepts and philosophies. And then I know you have a lot to say, and I want to hear it, and we all do. Hephaestus, or Vulcan, god of technology. It's interesting, you probably don't know that name, or you don't know much about him, right? That's because he's the god of technology. He's back there making everything happen. He is termed Kleitotechnes, right? He's in charge of technology on Olympus. And he falls from Olympus. I love that the god of technology is a fallen god. Make of that what you will. This is Homer in the Iliad. Hephaestus is talking to his wife Charis. Thetis saved me when I suffered much at the time of my great fall. Do you remember Thetis, mother of Achilles? This will come into the story. When I suffered much at the time of my great fall through the will of my own brazen-faced mother, Hera, who wanted to hide me for being lame. The god of technology is disabled. Again, interesting to think about. Then my soul would have taken much suffering had not Euronome and Thetis caught and held me. Caught and held me. That's an interesting theme for us. Catching and holding. He will do that to his mother. He will do that to his wife Aphrodite. Catch and hold. God of technology. Euronome and Thetis caught me and held me. Euronome, daughter of Oceanus, the ocean, whose stream bends back in a circle. With them I worked 9 years as a smith and wrought many intricate things. Pens that bend back, curved clasps, cups, necklaces, working there in the hollow of the cave. And the stream of Oceanus around us went on forever with its foam and murmur. No other among the gods or among mortal men knew about us except Euronome and Thetis. They knew, since they saved me. Now there are a couple, at least a couple different versions of Hephaestus and his mother Hera. Sometimes he comes out of Hera's head, like Athena came out of Zeus's head. Right? But regardless of the story, he is cast out because he is lame. And sometimes he is hurt in the fall from Olympus. So he's a really interesting character. He's ugly. He is lame, as the text says. He's outcast. He's a pariah. The god of technology is a pariah. Right? Yes, you like that. So he returns. And our old friend Dionysus brings him back. I love this. I believe Dionysus gets him drunk because he doesn't want to go. So this is Pausanias, who's like an early Greek travel writer. He says this in the temple of Dionysus at Athens. He says, there are paintings here. Dionysus brings Hephaestus up to heaven. One of the Greek legends, he writes, is that Hephaestus, when he was born, was thrown down by Hera. In revenge, he sent as a gift a golden chair with invisible fetters, chains. When Hera sat down, she was held fast, captured and held. And Hephaestus refused to listen to any of the other gods save Dionysus because he trusted him completely. Interesting choice. Yes, and after making him drunk, Dionysus brought him to heaven. I love that story so much. So much. The god of technology's mother hates him, and so he uses technology to trap her, ensnare her. Here we go. So he's married to Aphrodite. Okay, how did that happen? Right? I mean, you see him there. That's a pretty nice painting of him. He's not depicted usually that ripped or attractive. He's referred to as ugly and lame often, and yet he's with Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Well, as you might gather, Aphrodite cheats on him with Ares, or Mars. And what does he do? He creates a trap for them, for her. Here's the text from Pseudo-Hyginus. When Mars came, or Ares, came to the rendezvous with Aphrodite, he, together with her, fell into the snare made by Hephaestus, so that he could not extricate himself. And from their embrace, Harmonia was born. Harmonia? Really? And to her, Athena and Vulcan, and to her, Athena and Hephaestus gave a robe dipped in crimes. Dipped in crimes. A robe dipped in, so it's like an early scarlet letter. And also a necklace. He makes all kinds of necklaces and clasps and things. Because of this, their descendants are clearly marked as ill-fated. I know. He creates Pandora. I know. So, here's the text from the same author. Prometheus, son of Iapetus, first fashioned men from clay. And later Hephaestus, at Zeus's command, made a woman's form from clay. Athena gave it life, and the rest of the gods gave some other gift. And because of this, they named her Pandora. Pan, all, Dora, gift, all the gifts. She was given in marriage to Prometheus' brother, Epimetheus. We'll come back to that. Did you know he also forges the shield of Achilles? Remember, they share. Thetis is Hephaestus' kind of foster mother, but Thetis is Achilles' mother, an ocean nymph. And when Achilles returns from the underworld and is ready to fight, when he gets out of his tent after the deaths of Patroclus and he's ready to fight, he needs a shield. And so Athena asks Hephaestus to make the shield of Achilles, which is a great symbol for Greek culture. And of course, he's victorious in it with it. Here it is from Homer. Hephaestus took up a... Oh, sorry, no, that's not... This is what I wanted to get to, that's why I'm jumping ahead. Did you know that Hephaestus created robots? This is in the mythology. Almost 3,000 years old. Robots. This is from Homer, the Iliad. Hephaestus took up a heavy stick in his hand and went to the doorway limping. And in support of their master, moved his attendants. His attendants are robots. These are golden and in appearance like living young women. Okay, every time, right? There is intelligence in their hearts. And there is speech in them, and strength, and from the immortal gods they have learned how to do things. These stirred nimbly in support of their master, and moving to where Thetis sat in her shining chair. That's scary. You've got a god whom you have exiled from heaven and treat poorly and call him names, and he's got robots. Be careful. This is Pseudo-Apollodorus. And you may know, I don't know if you've heard of Talos. I know he's in a video game, but he's actually part of ancient mythology. The bronze giant Talos was given by Minos to Hephaestus, and was a bull. He had one blood vessel. This is genius. He had one blood vessel that extended from his neck down to his ankles. The lower end was held in place by a bronze stud. He's a Terminator, right? And this Tellus would run around the island of Crete 3 times a day to patrol it. And sailors would come up and this giant robot would come and kill them. Because you don't just land on Crete. There's a robot guarding you. There's that 1963 film of Jason and the Argonauts that depicts this. I forget who the director is. It's genius. Tellus is a huge statue, and they're looking up at it, and he just turns. It's chilling.
Harryhausen.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So here's Prometheus, who's probably a Titan. His name means forethought. And his brother is afterthought. You have a brother like that? And of course, as I said, Prometheus is a really interesting character, god, Titan, or close to it. At least his father was a Titan. And goes against Zeus all the time. He tricks Zeus, I won't get into all that, but he tricks Zeus a couple of times, making him take an offering, or trying to get him to take an offering, but it's not the best offering. And then Zeus gets pissed, and he wants to destroy humanity, like every god at some point. And Prometheus saves us by giving us fire, but he has to sneak the fire to us in a fennel stalk. So, trickster figure, definitely. Thief, our friend Prometheus. Punished, you may remember, by Zeus for his double deception to be fastened to a cliff, and an eagle or a vulture comes and eats his liver every day, and it grows back overnight. You know, the Greeks really knew how to create torture, at least mythological torture. And he is delivered, Prometheus, and by the way, I'm presenting Prometheus as an early technologist. He gave us fire. All right, that's pretty cool technology. Do you remember who rescues him? Heracles, or Hercules, rescues him. And Zeus lets him. He's like, all right, he suffered enough. Which Zeus never says. And he is finally delivered. Now, in the history of humanity thinking about technology, there is an interesting chapter from Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626. This notion of the New Atlantis, which I'm sure many of you know about. A book written in 1623 and published in 1627. And Bacon, just so you know, was really a pivotal figure in the history of thought, because he's really kind of the first scientist. I mean, Aristotle was really, and some of the pre-Socratics were scientists in their own right. But this is a man presenting a way of knowing that diverges from the centuries of theological thinking. And theology and philosophy merged pretty much. And that was the paradigm. That was the only way, really, to think about the world and yourselves in it. Bacon says, no, you know what? I think we need to look at nature. And nature was always capitalized, capital N, nature. Like it was a replacement for God. Because I think it kind of was. And he said, let's just not, we've done that. Let's just look at what we can see in the world, and let's try to make deductions from that. That's a radical concept. And as you know, it gave birth to others like Descartes, Newton, etc. Well, Bacon has this really interesting technological imagination. He has, in New Atlantis, there is something called Solomon's House. And Bacon writes, the end of our foundation is the knowledge of causes and the secret motions of things, and the enlarging of the bounds of human empire to the effecting of all things possible. Now notice those moves there. That's brilliant. The moves is we want to understand causes and the secret motions of things, right? So the secret motions, okay, I see something happening in the world and this happens and then this happens. Are these things connected? I don't know. They're not obviously connected. Maybe there are secret motions at work. And indeed there are, right? Atoms, gravity, stuff that he didn't think about. And the enlarging of the bounds of the human empire to the affecting of all things possible. This is the technological dream. Is to go from the savannah where you huddle at night by a fire maybe, or maybe you don't build a fire because you don't want to be eaten by a tiger or whatever, to affecting all things, right? From being a victim to being the victor, actually. So at Solomon's house, knowledge is power. And he imagines technologists, we would call them technologists, he imagines these people who have invented new things going around to all the villages. They live in Solomon's house, but they go around and explain to them how to use various things that they have created and how it improves their lives. And so there's a hint of utopia here, of course. And so technology, this begins a theme. Technology as philosophy, as a way of knowing, okay? So I think this is what I mean by getting deeper into this subject. Technology as philosophy, as a way of knowing. I think most of the discourse I read about technology is necessarily superficial. It's about how we use things, or maybe how they use us, but we don't think of technology as a way of being human, which it is. And you know what? It always has been. From the beginning, we've tried to manipulate our surroundings just to survive. And the things we use to do that, whether it's language or ideas or axes or fire or language, like I said, we are technologists from the very beginning. And to think that things are new and haven't been this way, I think that disempowers us in regard to technology. I think we feel in awe of an iPhone, and we should be. It's pretty awesome. It's just another item in a long line of innovations for humanity that have helped us manage and orient ourselves in the world. Technology is a philosophy. And you'll see I'm skipping great amounts of time here, because there's not that much writing or thinking about technology outside of mythology, which interestingly seems to have it quite a bit. And Plato, in regard to writing, Aristotle in some ways. There's not much until Francis Bacon. There's some Islamic scholars who write about technology, because the Islamic Golden Age was one of technology, by the way. There was ophthalmology and all kinds of advancements in technology during the Muslim Golden Age. So now we jump to Martin Heidegger, 1954, the question concerning technology. And he's going to get to a similar point, which is technology is a way of being human. It's a way of being human, or it's a human way, I guess. So the dichotomy of humanity and technology doesn't hold up the deeper you go. Heidegger says this: thus we shall never experience our relationship to the essence of technology so long as we merely conceive and push forward the technological, put up with it, or evade it. Everywhere we remain unfree and chained to technology, whether we passionately affirm it or deny it. This is Plato using writing to talk about how writing is dangerous. Right? You cannot escape technology. You can't. And Heidegger's interest was what philosophers call ontology, or being, although he meant it in an actually different way. Writing when he did in the 20th century, he was exhausted with traditional philosophy and their attempts to build systems and create truth. What he wanted instead was to get at the essence of things, the being, the actual thing itself, right? Not some patina of language or concepts about the thing, just being itself. And so he says the essence or being of technology is by no means technological. It can't be, right? Because technology is just a thing. It's a practice in the world. So something must be informing that practice, right? And this is philosophy and technology. So I don't want to get too much in the weeds here with Heidegger, because you can get lost really easily. But basically, this is starting to sound familiar, I would think. We've seen it in the mythological stories. We've seen it in the etymology of the words, in fact. Technology is both instrumental, it's a thing we use to get something done, but it's also anthropological. It's about us. Not only did we create it, it returns the favor. Right? It shapes us. Remember, writing restructures consciousness, technology restructures humanity. He's talking again about poesis, about the making. Heidegger, I think this is very interesting and cool. Heidegger had lost all patience with the Western tradition in philosophy, but he did see, as I do, in the pre-Socratics, some early wisdom that got lost as we moved into Plato. So he does love the pre-Socratics, and that sense of how the world is made, meaning how it comes into being. And he gets into this, again, I'm sorry to get into too much of this specifics, but he's interested in truth, as a philosopher should be, but truth, you know the word truth, aletheia, see it there in Greek? Do you recognize a word there? Lethe, the river Lethe, which is the river of forgetfulness. So truth means to not forget. Interesting, right? Especially coming out of an oral culture. Truth is what you remember. What you remember. And so Heidegger is interested in that truth that has an essence and has always been there, but is hidden and can't be seen. But it reveals itself. It reveals it. It's an unveiling, and that's ultimately what aletheia means, to unveil, to not forget. All right. Technology is poetry for Heidegger. The making, the old sense, the old Greek sense of technology is making. Technology is both process and product. Again, we tend to talk and write and think about technology as something that's done to us, which it is, but it's also something we did. We're all Victor Frankenstein, and we're all his monster. It's process and product, and it's dialogical. It goes back and forth. Technology is revelation for Heidegger, as an unveiling, as showing something that we wouldn't see before. Right? I mean, so for example, I don't know if Hunter's here, but we've talked about this before, about how, I hate big data, and I just hate it because it's like writing. It's outside of me, and I don't understand it, and it's telling me things about me that I don't agree with, that I don't have an argument against. But isn't that a way to learn something about yourself? It can be. It depends on the intention of the makers and the users, right? But, big data is interesting because you need an objective perspective on yourself, and it gives you that, but it's not objective. And we'll get into that when we talk about users and the use in a few weeks. So Heidegger's, almost all philosophers of technology mark a difference around the 18th century. And that's because of the Industrial Revolution, and the invention of machines. And then they make another difference, usually in the 20th century, with television and electronics. So he says that technology depends upon a standing reserve It's almost like capital, the resources of capital. Nothing in the world, in this sense of technology, is incorporating and using a standing reserve. It's always a means, never an end. And so you create something just for the means, like an airplane. I mean, you use it to travel, to get from one place to another. It has no intrinsic value, is what Heidegger is saying. It's merely that. And then he talks about the dangers of enframing. Enframing, which, he says enframing is this: pushing forward nothing but what is revealed in order. And I know that sounds philosophical, but it's actually pretty simple. Enframing is saying that all that is what we can see. And what we can see is what we use to see with. Whether it's big data, whether it's an ideology, whether it's a mythology. And think about that. That's exactly right. We do this all the time. Big data, technology, mythology. What we're always trying to do is reduce the world to something manageable, right? Because we cannot, there's too much. There's just too much. Too much stimulation, data coming at us. It must be organized in some way. It must be. Or you'll just be, watching butterflies, and then you'll watch the trees. And then pretty soon you're in LA, chilling out. We've got to reduce the world. That's not a problem, that's a necessity. But to frame the world, to reduce the world, to put it in a box, to put it in a story, is good, necessary, but leaves out all this. So what do you do? What do you do? Now I'm going past Heidegger here, and I'm saying you've got to let your frames dissolve. You've got to let your frames break, or else you're stuck in this pretty small world. And then, as he says, you push forward nothing but what is revealed in the ordering. You put nothing out there that doesn't fit in your frame. And that's pretty small in a big universe. This is Heidegger. The threat to humanity does not come in the first instance from the potentially lethal machines and apparatuses of technology. The actual threat has already afflicted humanity in its essence. The rule of enframing threatens humanity with the possibility that it could be denied to him to enter in a more original, revealing truth, unveiling, and hence to experience the call of a more primal truth. Right? Yes. Now there's another technologist. He's actually a theologian, and I want to mention him because I think he's pretty cool, and he doesn't get, I don't think, the credit he deserves. This is Jacques Ellul, who wrote a book called The Technological Society in 1954. And he's pretty much making similar arguments to Heidegger and to this thread that we've seen throughout, that technology is radically human, and the dichotomy doesn't hold up. And that technology is a product of philosophy, or a product of a worldview. And he writes about technique. Now, this has actually created a problem, one might say a technological problem for Ellul, in that the English translation did not pick up on the notion of technique, but on technology. And so technique is, for Ellul, what Heidegger was for enframing. And Heidegger's sense of technology is instrumental, right? Not as instrumental, but as anthropological. Technique is the totality of methods rationally arrived at and having absolute efficiency in every field of human activity. See, we were headed there all along. The machine represents the ideal toward which technique strives. The machine is the ideal of technique, which is this method, right? This rational method. Nothing at all escapes technique today. How could it? if technique is the totality of methods. And he writes, the tool enables man and woman to conquer. But women and men, dost thou not know there is no more victory, which is thy victory? The victory of our days belongs to the tool. I think Ellul doesn't get the credit he wants because of that mistranslation or confusing translation. He gets received as being against technology, just completely against, like apocalyptically against technology, and there's no hope. And it's interesting because he's a theologian too. I think this affects his reception, is that people don't want to hear that old story of the fall. You know, we use these tools and it ends up killing us because we're so broken, we're so fragmented. So I wanted to give you his voice, just a few minutes of his voice in this documentary called, I forget what it's called. Anyway, here he is, just briefly, in his own voice, and you will hear and see that he's not a technological apocalypticist. He's just thinking about these things as we're doing tonight.
Nous sommes là en présence donc de nous demander de la question, est-ce qu'il y a vraiment un sens possible? Mais la recherche du sens ne peut pas être une affaire purement intellectuelle. La recherche du sens implique une mise en question radicale de la vie moderne. Pour retrouver un sens, il faut mettre en question ce qui n'a pas de sens. Or, nous sommes entourés d'objets qui sont actifs, qui sont efficaces, etc., mais qui n'ont pas de sens. Alors, autant une œuvre d'art a un sens, ou plusieurs sens, ou provoque chez moi un sentiment, une émotion qui donne un sens à ma vie, autant le produit technique n'en a pas. Et d'autre part, nous sommes devant l'obligation de redécouvrir des vérités fondamentales que la technique efface, ou ce que l'on peut appeler des valeurs importantes, essentielles, pour que l'homme trouve que la vie vaut la peine d'être vécue. Autrement dit, c'est à partir du moment où je considère que la situation est vraiment dangereuse que je dois mettre en mouvement bien plus que des techniques, mais toutes mes capacités intellectuelles, humaines, mes relations avec les autres, créer des mouvements, etc., etc. C'est-à-dire que c'est lorsque je pense qu'il y a le risque d'une fatalité, autrement dit, que les choses risquent de se développer comme un destin pour l'homme, et j'ai écrit que la technique finalement se développait comme une sorte de destin pour l'homme. C'est à ce moment-là que l'homme doit se révolter et refuser que ce soit un destin. Et à ce moment-là, nous retrouvons ce que l'humanité a toujours fait quand elle s'est trouvée en présence d'un destin. Il suffit de se rappeler de toutes les pièces de théâtre grecques où c'est en présence de la fatalité que l'homme se dresse en disant non, je veux aussi que l'humanité existe et je veux que la liberté existe. À ce moment-là, alors, il faut espérer non pas remporter des victoires très rapides, et il ne faut pas espérer que nous aurons une facilité dans le combat, mais il faut savoir que nous continuons à, je dirais, à remplir notre rôle d'homme. Mais en réalité, c'est une situation qui n'est pas insurmontable. Il n'y a pas de fatalité que nous ne puissions pas vaincre. Ça, seulement alors, il faut des raisons très profondes pour se mettre à lutter. Il faut avoir des convictions très fortes. Il faut vouloir que l'homme continue finalement à être un homme. Cette lutte contre la fatalité technicienne, eh bien, nous l'avons menée dans des petites actions, mais il faut toujours que ce soit des groupes humains à grandeur humaine, où l'on se connaisse. Ça ne sera pas des grands mouvements de foule, ça ne sera pas d'immenses syndicats, ni d'immenses partis politiques qui arriveront à lutter contre ce développement. Alors, ce que je viens de dire, ce n'est pas très efficace, bien sûr. Si nous luttons contre des choses parce qu'elles sont trop efficaces, nous ne pouvons pas jouer à être plus efficaces. Ça ne sera pas immédiatement très efficace. Mais il faut espérer que l'homme ne meurt pas et se transmet de génération en génération des vérités.
And I'm sorry to tell you, but Jacques Ellul was a Terminator. And my laptop is running out of power. All right, so what does it mean to be Frankenstein's children? It means to see in our history technology as a reflection of nature. We were doing what nature does. That's how we acted in the world. We were replicating nature. We tried to do the things that nature did. And then we learned that we could do things better than nature did. And then now, technology has created a new nature, a new world, a new sense of being that we must encounter. And I love so many things of what Ellul said, but one of them, well, a couple of them was right at the end. You can't try to be efficient because technology has already won that game. You must be inefficient. That means you must be slow. And the second thing is that it's small groups. It's going to be small groups of people gathered together, not big movements, but small groups of people, which is a call back to orality and to the nature of storytelling. And I wanted, before we get, because I know you have so much to say, by the way, that's a painting produced by AI, which is terrible, but okay. I wanted you to know what else we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. Next week is facts and fake news, truth in the digital age. It's time we talked about this, maybe past time. An appetite for power, users and the used. My favorite title ever, maybe. Eros Ex Machina, love in the time of the internet. Technology and transcendence, the seeker in the digital age. And then finally, fearful symmetries, being human in a post-human world. Thank you for your attention. I can't wait to hear what